Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for The Capture by Kathryn Lasky. So this is an anthropomorphic fantasy series, meaning anthropomorphic meaning human characteristics applied to something that is not human, primarily animals, sometimes other objects or ideas, but primarily animals. This is high fantasy. This is middle grade. Yeah, so let's go into this. The Capture is the first book in the Guardians of Ga'Hoole series by Kathryn Lasky. This is a fantasy series about owls, and I really like owls, and so I really like this series. Primarily, it follows the character of Soren in a sort of coming-of-age / hero's journey story. It doesn't do much in terms of doing something terribly new, but it is pretty unique due to the world and the anthropomorphizing that goes on within it. So yeah, I like the animals, I like the fantasy aspect, I like the owl aspect and the anthropomorphic fantasy aspect of it for sure. Before I get into the rest of this review, I'd just quickly like to say thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. I'm T. If you're liking what you're seeing from us, please like, comment, and subscribe. So this is a series that I first read as a kid and have wanted to come back to since then, and to see what I think now that I'm older and have a little bit of a different outlook on life. Of course, I love that it is fantasy. That's a great, wonderful thing. I tend to really enjoy anthropomorphic stories, primarily thinking of like Redwall still being one of my favorite series of all time. And so that definitely ties over into my enjoyment of this for sure. And owls just happen to be one of my favorite birds. And so kind of it's just like a crossroads of all my favorite things coming together all at once, and it works really great. So in a lot of ways, this series is just like a perfect crossroads for me. I didn't realize that that's what I had wrote, but I'm glad that I did. The first book really just starts the beginning of that coming of age story. It really just tells a piece of that story and not really the whole thing. And we barely get to see any of it. We do get some of it, but we also have to remember that this is a middle grade series. And for that, it is intentionally written to be more digestible. The smaller chunks of the story allow us to read one book and find a good ending, and then move on. It does tell a complete story, but not the whole hero's journey story or anything like that. We just get a piece of that, to which it will be added onto as we continue through the books. I think primarily books 1 through 3 are that main hero's journey portion of the story that were most well known, that we're really expecting and well known for. And I think in some ways, and I think in a lot of ways actually, that would be frustrating to some older readers that are more used to faster paced, complete hero's journey in one book type stories. And I just thinking about that, and I think maybe there might be a portion of that that's why I had a problem with the Ranger's Apprentice series by John Flanagan. Is that his name? Something like that. That's a series that I DNF'd. Anyways, let's continue on. Although it is fantasy, this is actually in many aspects an accurate portrayal of owls, their feeding habits, their ways of life, etc. Of course, not every aspect is accurate, and it is very clearly a fantasy representation of them, and the cultures are formed by that nature. But there is still plenty to learn and to appreciate, and I definitely, so I liked owls before I read this series, for sure, 100%. But after reading this series, my appreciation for owls had grown greatly. And coming back to it now, I still really love owls, and I still read this and like, yeah, I remember why I love owls and why I love this series so much. But there is still plenty to learn and appreciate. However, at the same time, as an older reader, I can see some of the disturbing intricacies now. The difference between friend and food is not a very clear line, and that's kind of interesting at times, the way that that's woven into the story. That is something that we really wouldn't understand as a kid. We wouldn't really think about. It's just like, oh, that's interesting. They've got a snake for a house pet, or a nanny, if you want to call it that. And there's some intricacy and nuance to that within the story world, and it's kind of interesting to see. That is something that we really wouldn't understand as a kid, the horrors of what is actually taking place, and yet it is on clear display here in this book. There's some things where you read that and you're like, I forgot that owls do that sort of thing because I'm just reading a fun story about owls, but then you read it and you're like, oh yeah, that's true. Owls do that. And it's just interesting the way that in our mind as young readers, we read past it and we're like, oh, that's weird, haha, and we move on. But as an older reader, I look back and I read it, and again I think, oh yeah, okay, that adds a whole nother layer to what's going on here. Lasky does not shy away from it at all. She just also doesn't focus on it though there are the occasional direct references to it. And that's, I think, probably the best way to approach it, because you don't need to be scarring children, you don't need to be hurting children in that way, but at the same time you want to get children interested. Like I think part of why this series is the way that it is because Lasky wanted to make kids be interested in owls and birds and stuff like that. And so she wrote them in a way that has some accuracies to it, while also taking some liberties in order to tell the story that she wants to tell at the same time. I remember that this first book was never my favorite, and upon reread, I'd say that is probably still the case, even though I haven't continued on with the reread yet, with the rereading of the rest of the series yet. But I did enjoy it, and I do enjoy rereading it, and so I'm glad that I did finally, and I definitely plan to continue through the series, and I don't know when, but it'll probably be fairly soon here. I want to continue through the series for sure. There it is right there. Overall, it is an enjoyable and engaging, but not my favorite book of all time, but I definitely do think that it was worth a read, especially for me as a kid, and going back through it now, I would still say the same thing. I'm glad that I reread it. So anyways, that is my review for The Capture by Kathryn Lasky, book 1 of the Guardians of Ga'Hoole series. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and our social media is linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.